Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. Hope you've liked the video so far. Please do subscribe to our channel. Today we're going to talk about the triumph of chutzpah over common sense, the biggest corporate scandal in modern history. Enron in the smartest guys in the room. So Enron, once the envy of all organizations on Wall Street, is a classic case of corporate governance gone wrong. This memoir, written on the Enron scandal, is something that all middle and senior managers must be aware of. All the events that led to this debacle cannot be explained in this summary, but in short, here's what happened. An ambitious guy named Ken Lay met with a brilliant McKinsey consultant named Jeff Skilling, who gave this ambition a design that mesmerized everyone else. Now enter into this equation a smart finance guy named Andy Fastow, who could structure and then restructure any transaction until the time he was the only guy who could understand this. Of course, well within the rules. Now garnish this with auditors who got into the game but realized it was too late to get out now, and the SEC, which was the SEBI equivalent, that was caught napping. Bam! You get an organization that scaled all Wall Street peaks quarter on quarter, making everyone involved in the process so rich that they forgot ultimately it was a hollow business that would eventually go bust. See the stock chart here. So first things first, who was Jeff Skilling? Jeff Skilling was a designer of ditches, not a digger of ditches. His arrogance was that he was the smartest guy in the room, and anyone who disagreed with him wasn't just bright enough to get him. To talk about perhaps where his arrogance could have come, a McKinsey consultant once told Forbes, "We don't learn from the clients. Their standards aren't high enough. We learn from other McKinsey partners." So, what was the Enron business model? So, Jeff Skilling basically saw patterns. By 1980s, Skilling was convinced that he'd found an answer. Nah, the answer to the gas pipeline industry. The gas bank. Interaction between gas buyers and suppliers. Producers would contract to Enron, customers would then contract from Enron, everything in between was Enron's. It's just like a bank. You deposit some money, someone would lend money from you. Try and understand the old banker's motto 363. Take money at 3%, lend it at 6%, and be on the golf course by 3 pm. But Enron here had a lower risk than a bank because it already knew what the price of gas was going to be. Unlike the bank that assumes trends, it had already sold it because it had forward contracts. Their final trick up the sleeve was they started trading contracts, derivatives. In our last video of fake money, fake assets, fake teachers, we discussed how bad derivatives were. Enron basically applied this same model to multiple commodities like electricity, broadband, etc. The simple answer to everything was free market deregulation was solution to everything. They would want to be the intermediary party between suppliers and buyers. Then to top it all off, Skilling wanted a mark to market accounting rather than a historical accounting. Now mark to market accounting effectively meant realizing future cash flows at their NPV irrespective whether that money came or not. So what went wrong? Like any company that trades for a living, just like Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns 7 years later, once Enron had lost confidence of its trading partners, it was toast. Another problem was that their performance review committee ranked managers on the same scale. The decision had to be unanimous. This led to horse trading, your guy for mine. Earnings were given the maximum weightage. All departments measured on earnings involved huge politics, but Jeff Skilling thought it brought the best out of Enron. What was the best? Rewarding brains, innovation, dedication, but many thought it brought out the worst: ruthlessness, selfishness, and greed. Enron International booked costs incurred in making deals that were dead under assets, as there was no official letter saying the deals were dead. Till the time the deal wasn't officially dead, it was still an asset. They never thought anything could go wrong. So did the banks that financed the deals. It was a mania. Building projects in third world countries, often run by dictators where capitalism was still a very new concept, was absolutely fraught with peril, and it was absurd to believe that everything will go as per plan. While investing in third world countries, companies bid and thought of making some real quick profit by selling some pieces to other buyers when the project was underway. It all depended on the greater fuel theory. Someone else was always ready to pay a higher price. It all started falling down when people stopped buying from Enron. The model of compensation in Enron was also flawed. The developers got paid on present value of future cash flows even before a single pipe was laid. The only thing that mattered was getting the deal done. The problem was that no one was held responsible for operation of the project, yet it was the operation that produced real money. Example of this was the Dabhol plant in Maharashtra in India that made Enron controversial before bankruptcy. India's energy sector was always run by state control boards on the verge of bankruptcy, as so much energy was either stolen or given for free to farmers in bureaucratic quagmire. And also, it was not that Enron did not have any internal controls. They had a risk assessment and controlled RAC department, which had the weakest leader who caved into business demands. It was by design. At Enron, there was virtually no consequence for cutting a bad deal. Little or no attention was paid to customer relationships since nobody was getting a big bonus for keeping customers happy. All that mattered was signing a deal. Any company worth its salt uses accounting rules to smooth its peak and valleys. But with Enron, it got to a point where it was so prolific. Budget shortfalls weren't just business issues, there were accounting issues. There was absolute conviction that at Enron, clever accounting could alter business reality. Now, here are some anecdotes about the Enron culture. Even before the dawning of the bull market in 1990s, a new ethos gradually was taking place in corporate America. Anything that was not blatantly illegal was okay, no matter how deceptive the practice was. There was this famous dog to duck theory which Enron used. If it is within defined rules that a duck is an animal that has a body and can walk on ground as well as swim, Enron would make sure a dog was portrayed as a duck because even a dog had a body, could walk on ground as well as swim. No shorts, no ducks was the culture at Enron. Nobody got rewarded for saving money. They get rewarded for making money. People had difficulty believing they were even human as per one interview that states that walking out of a posh office into a limo and getting to an airport to fly a private jet made it really difficult to get out of it. But always remember, easy money is rarely as easy as it seems. So, to close, the journey of Enron was from zealotry to greed to arrogance to demise.